Such a good chapter.
Good morning. It is chapter 4, part 2 of the book of Gap and the Gain. Welcome here. And we're excited to dive into this chapter today. I feel like everybody here would have a ton of examples to use of where we did not measure backwards. And it's such a simple concept, and it reminded me so much of how I used to tell the kids, but look, you have already this, this, and this, right? And as parents, I think we naturally do it easier on our kids than what we do on ourselves. And so that was my opening thought of, oh, maybe I need to parent myself a little bit better. So always measure backwards. Increase your hope and resilience. Isn't it interesting that that is what happens when you look back to see what you have already accomplished and think in the gain instead of thinking, oh, I'm not far enough. I have so far to go. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. Interesting concept, hey? Anyone have something that they thought stood out to them as you were diving into this chapter? I need my highlighter.
I instantly thought of something because I have a friend who has a special needs son in school. And this made me think of how much his teacher is in the gap because his teacher phones my friend every single day telling her what he has done wrong that day. Instead of focusing
So
on the things that he's doing right and how he's improving and who's going to improve if all you're going to constantly be focusing on is what you're doing wrong, then you're just going to be defeated and you're not even going to want to try. It's so discouraging. And I just was so eye-opening to me. I was like, she is in the gap. She is constantly in the gap.
and who is more influential than a teacher that sits with a child every day, right? And if you look at how they looked at small things, last year Rosie was learning to walk on the grass. Remember how impossible it seemed? There's so many examples in childhood that you can see even special needs children move ahead fast, and there's things that they accomplish, but we don't see them on the daily because we look, forward, wanting more. The concept there of special needs teachers burn out faster. And I wondered about what if they knew this concept, shifted their mindset, and looked into the gain for the children, because how else do children learn? It's kind of absurd to think of an adult that has already learned all these things and someone had the patience to teach them these things, now thinks that the child needs to go faster. Isn't that, to me, that's like just such an oxymoron of, someone taught you how to use a spoon. Why do you not think that you have to teach someone else to use a spoon, kind of thing? And then he talks about in psychology, inattentional blindness occurs when you are so fixated on one thing that you fail to see everything else going on around you. It's easy to miss the gains happening throughout our lives or businesses because we may have tunnel vision on the problem in front of us. Hyper focusing, right? Seeing gains gives you hope, confidence, and motivation to keep going, even when progress is difficult or slower than desired. I mean, it's just such a common day knowledge of when you're working hard on a certain thing and it's harder than what you had expected it to be and it's taking longer, it's easy to become discouraged because you're just looking at that thing. Inattentional blindness, you're only hyper focusing on that one thing. But what about all the other things around you?
And I've thought of this concept many times, even before reading this. It's like when you're just focusing on what's going wrong, you're not going to see what's going right. Like
Yeah.
I say that to my kids all the time. It's like here we get to parent ourselves again. During the day, if you're just focusing on all the things that are going wrong, you're missing what's going right.
I think that's where a lot of times where gratitude comes in too as well. Like if you're not living or being intentional maybe with gratitude, with what you have and what you've gained, um, that's one thing too. Then you won't see the good things. You won't see all that you've done up until now. And so, yeah, that's one thing I thought of.
Well, gratitude completely shifts your perspective, right? Like it causes you to look to the gain.
In my kids' nightly devotion, we actually talked about this, how what you think physically impacts your body, and it's scientifically proven. And I love that it was even in their little evening devotion. It's like if you're going to focus on the things that you're thankful for, it's going to make you happier. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to, like even yesterday in our homeschool lesson, laughter is healing to the body. Gratitude is healing to the body. And emotions are important. Sorry.
Human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. The person you are right now is as transient and as fleeting and as temporary as all the people you have ever been. I thought this was an interesting thing to focus on. As humans learn, we quickly adapt to our new normal, even when that new normal is very different from what our life used to be. Isn't that ever the truth? You can take someone who's had like a really different life and completely shift their circumstances, and if their attitude isn't correct, they're just going to adapt and still have the same complaining attitude in the new life. And I think of people that have money mindset issues or scarcity thinking around money or gain in their life, that they think that they can never ever get ahead, or someone owes them something all the time. They're always looking for, well, that's too expensive for me, I can't afford that, or I need that. Do you know what I mean? Like there's people that have this constant mindset that everything in life is too expensive for them. But who's decided that? Like it's just them. It's just they just decided that was their case, right? And so these people, if they come into more money, they'll still think the same thing.
And that's why you see people who win the lottery. I think it's like 5 to 8 years they're broke. And so many of them
That
then either commit suicide or end up on the streets because they can't handle it. It has nothing to do with the money. It has absolutely nothing to do with the money. Doesn't, money just amplifies who you already are and where your values already are and what you already think. And so you get to focus and you get to work on that mindset. Where is my money mindset? Do I have gratitude? And then when you get money, it's simply going to amplify who you already are.
and it reminds me of the early years of Plexus, where I think it was one of my very first trips to Maui, where a lot of the American ladies had grown really fast in their business and they still had existing jobs. Some of these were teachers, nurses. They didn't have like a massive income in their used to be life. And then Plexus came into their lives, and then they really amplified their income in a short amount of time. Well, if you don't know how American taxes work, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. They pay on an average of 35 to 45% a month on anything that they get from Plexus, right? And so a lot of these women were caught in this, I'm making a lot of money, but I have no clue what I'm doing. And then at the end of the year, they got this massive tax bill, and they hadn't been paying taxes on their own because that's our responsibility. And they were in just distraught, absolutely distraught, right? And so one of the men did a financial course and helped people walk through on how to take control of your money. As to Barb's point, money is neutral until we attach a meaning to it, right? All they saw was more money coming in. Yay! But that wasn't the end of it. They took their mindset of where they were into having even more money. It made no difference. It's where we get to grow. The conscious competence learning model was kind of neat. And I thought there's so many times of where we use examples of children that apply to adults. And he talks about potty training their twins. Stage 1, the unconscious incompetence, where that's just what you do. You just pee your diaper, right? And they're blissfully unaware of what's even happening in their bodily functions. And then stage 2 is conscious incompetence. They strip them down and let them know, like, oh, this is what happens. Your body is doing this, right? And stage 3, you now know a great deal on the subject. They now say, I peed, because they're aware of what's happening and what their body is doing, but regularly need prompting to remember to take a potty break. And then stage 4, unconscious competence, and it becomes second nature, where they no longer need to support to use the restroom. It's just a part of life now. Sometimes we so easily walk through these stages that I think this is where it's so easy to lose perspective of the gain, because in stage 1, the gain seemed impossible. In stage 4, it's just normal. But it's like subtle, that we move subtly through it.
I thought of it when I was reading it this morning. I thought of it like this. So like very often, once you've gone through something, you can see it in somebody else, but they can't see it in themselves yet. So let's say like you've learned something recently about yourself or about humanity as a whole, how we respond, maybe triggers, whatever it might be. And you're aware of that now, and you're practicing it, and you're becoming better at it, at being able to have awareness of it and how you respond to it. And then you see somebody else and they have no idea that they're even doing it. And you're like, that's what they're doing. You see it in them. You now are in stage 4. You have the unconscious competence. You are now aware of it, and you automatically switch your mindset. Maybe it's negative thinking. Let's use that as an example. That other person, they're still in unconscious incompetence because they're just thinking, I'm not negative. I never thought I was negative. I was one of the most negative people out there. They're just constantly in their negative little world thinking, I'm not negative, but you can see how they are. They are completely incompetent and have no idea what's going on. And then you're like, that's actually really negative. You bring awareness to them. Very often outside forces help us grow. You bring awareness to them, and then they're in this conscious incompetence. Oh crap, I'm negative, but I have no idea how to fix this. And then they start learning how to fix it. Maybe they bring in books on being positive. Maybe they hire a coach. Maybe they go speak to a mentor or get therapy, whatever it might be. They start learning how to rethink their thoughts. They start learning how to focus them differently. And then they step into unconscious competence because they have learned how to redirect their negative thoughts. It's like, I love how they used potty training because every mom knows, but I was like, this is every experience ever. We just don't think of it in these steps.
And if you take that into context, there's like a million examples per day a person could think of, right? And it reminded me of, or like I saw Melinda's comment there of when her son was in kindergarten and the teacher always speaks negatively. We might be picking on teachers today a little bit, and I don't mean that intentionally, but what an example of teaching in the gain or in the gap, right? And those little sponges in front of you are going to reflect exactly what you say. And it's the same thing when a mom has a baby and she's like, oh, this baby is so fussy, she cries all the time. And then a different mom takes the baby and just like, baby's actually kind of nice. There was just a few issues to take care of. It's all a matter of how you look at it, right? And then he talks about we reinterpret or reconstruct our memory in light of what our mental set is in the present. I found that kind of interesting. That you actually frame a memory in the light of what your mental set is in the present. In this sense, it is more accurate to say the present causes the meaning of the past than it is to say that the past causes the meaning of the present. Our memories are not stored and objective in entities, but living parts of ourselves in the present. This is the reason our present moods and future goals so affect our memories. So basically, he's saying we can make that a good or a bad memory, basically on how we put perspective on it. When you draw on a memory, you always do so from the perspective of your present self. Psychologists call memory a reconstruction because it's always reconstructed based on your present views, which influence how you see and perceive past events. This is where, when we talked about, you can have your kids all grow up in the same house and a certain event happened, and each one is going to recall a different set of memories based on how they perceived it.
I think this is also, Rebecca and I talked about this recently, how our body keeps track.
Mm.
Body has memory of the things that we have gone through, because I mean everything is energy, and we place a negative or a positive energy upon it. And I found that every year at the same time I would get sick. Every single year at the exact same time I would get sick. And when I actually was aware of that and I looked back on it, it was because I had had a negative experience during that time and I was holding on to that. Your body keeps track. It keeps track. And until I could turn around that negative experience and see what I was given out of it that was positive, what I learned from it, or how I grew from it, or what it brought to my life that was good, I wasn't able to let go of it. And I feel like this is the exact same idea. We can, even though that happened years ago, every year I was putting a negative spin on that memory. I was not turning it around for my own sake.
Which takes you to the bottom of page 96. You can take for granted how far you've come, ignore your progress, and miss out on the confidence of remembering where you were. It's how you remember it, right? Going back and appreciating how far you've come keeps you in the game. And I think that's if we think Plexus business wise, that's a really big deal to think in the gains if you look back instead of in the gap. Because if you look back and all you see is the gap of I'm not far enough, I have so much to do, I didn't make it to my goal. If you think all those things looking back, it'll just be harder moving forward. But if you look into your past and the gain and see all the things that you learned last year, see all the things that you did, all the things that happened, and this is going to propel me forward, that thought process is going to make such a big difference. Who here all journals? I want to say that I do. I don't think occasional writing down of thoughts is actual journaling. And it's something that I definitely want to get more into, because I loved how he used the whole example of looking back to what you had written and seeing your own growth. And so that's where he takes us into the questions. On the cover of his journals, front cover, here's what he asked. Where am I right now? What are my wins from the past 90 days? What are my desired wins for the next 90 days? Where will I be in 12 months? Where will I be in 3 years? Only takes you about 5 to 10 minutes. And I know, I'm a notebook person. all my 11 years of Plexus, this is my life, right? And so I guess if you really think of it, it's a form of journaling because it shows you what you're doing, but it's not really putting your thoughts on paper. But I still have a lot of training, coaching, and all those notes in my notebooks as well. And that would be a lot of the thought processes taking you through the growth, right? Anyhow, even now looking back when we were moving, I had a stacks and stacks of these, just so many. And I was like, what do I do with them? And I went through some and I was like, oh my goodness, I remember this. That's what I was doing back then. Oh my word. And then you can see how far you had come. And that, I think, is his purpose with putting down habits of journaling, is it forces you to look at where you were and then to see where you are now. So it basically forces you into the game, right? Anybody have some thoughts on that? Because I'm obviously not the professional journaler here. Yeah. Holly, I used to do that, and I just started buying notebooks, and one after another, that was the place, right? And it's not organized, and it's got everything from like I still run a planner, but all my notes and all my trainings and things is in my notebook. And it's just interesting to look back to see what you were working on and how you were processing those things. So the example of these people who had new participants in strategic coach program who have to be earning a minimum of $200,000 to qualify at the entry level. Frequently express negative judgments about how they've performed since starting their entrepreneurial careers. So he asked every group if they are successful, and almost no one raises their hands. The real reason they feel unsuccessful is because of how they measure themselves and their progress. They're measuring themselves against what they want to achieve, not of what they have already achieved, right? And so after sitting for a while, reflecting on the group's common responses, stop setting goals, stop trying to achieve something big, be positive and sing kumbaya. Finally, Chad writes on the board, AMB, always measure backwards. And initially people don't get what that means. And then he says there's only one way to measure success. You measure success backwards by looking at where you are now compared to where you were before. And it takes some time for it to sink in. And so how many of you remember when you set the goal, if I can make 50,000 a year, that would be so freaking awesome. All hands go up because you remember being in a lower income, right? And this is where we subconsciously move into higher income without thinking of the gain. Then you pass that milestone and say, oh, if I could make $100,000, that would be amazing. Who can think of an example of where you have grown through something that you used to think would be big, and then you grew through it, and now it's like almost irrelevant? I think the money example is a really big one, but there's other things as well.
Ranks. And then if we fall back, we act like if we've never achieved it.
Because we're thinking in the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hear people say, oh, well, I'm not holding their rank. And it's like,
No, but you achieved that.
you achieved it already. That is done.
You did the work to achieve that.
Mhm.
Points do not define your success.
Belinda says done that. And it
I think
costs,
all of us have at one point in time.
often the insight is a bit of a gut punch. And I think it's just a reality check, right? It's a little bit of a reality check to see when these entrepreneurs realize how in the gap they are about themselves and their business, they also realize that they're in the gap about almost everything else in your life, because how you approach your life is how you're going to be approaching your business. And it's the same measurement that you use for life is going to be used in your business, right? And this is where I think it's really where it infiltrates into your family. It seeps into your family's mindset. They see that they're in the gap about their team, their spouse, and their kids because they are measuring themselves against where they want them to be. So we attach the gap thinking to our family, to our spouse, to other things in our life, rather than against where they were before. They realize they've made happiness an impossible ideal for themselves and everyone around them. And it's really hard. And I think this is another thing in parenting of where when your kids are working towards something and they don't achieve it, and the parent becomes discouraged.
I saw, and just thinking about this now, I followed the Edmonton Oilers on Instagram. And last weekend they had Mother's Weekend. So the moms all went with their sons on the plane to every game and they all sat together. And it looked so cool. And it was so interesting. They did a bunch of videos where they asked different questions and the moms had to respond. And I found it incredibly fascinating to see how each mom responded because it told you a lot about their parenting philosophies and how they got to where they are today. Some of them were all about very child-centered and focusing only on that child and their growth and all their ideas and wants. And the one mom of the most successful player said, don't make it your dream. It's their dream. Just be there. Do not take it on yourself. Just be there. If they want it, they will do it. I was like, oh, that's really good. That's really good. It's like, you are a wise mother.
That's a really big deal. And Barb's comment is massive. Relapse is a part of recovery. And I think relapse is a part of life in anything that you are trying to achieve, right? Like recovery is a massive, massive working towards goal that you achieve over time. I think the kumbaya part, Melinda, is avoidance. The more you practice measuring yourself backwards, the more confident and motivated you will become. The basic message here is do it over and over and over, right? It's practice, it's habit. Teach yourself to think this way. Email subject line, Don Bradley 2.0. We can reinvent ourselves. We can teach ourselves to think better. We can make ourselves be aware of where we need to consistently remind ourselves, not should, would, or could have, or blame or shame, but rather, oh, here I am. Okay, let's reframe this. 2025 is Barb Dick 2.0. I like that. And it's interesting how, like, walking through these exercises, um, they're not big hard things, right? Like there's a whole book full of what you could sum up in one sentence. This book says, think in the gain, what you have already accomplished, not in the gap. Really, that's just the one sentence, the foundational belief, but how to apply it to the finer areas of your life that it's really effective is what is going to turn your life around, right? Now it's your turn. Let's measure your gains. The only way to measure the distance you have traveled is by measuring from where you are back to the point of where you started. Like that's kind of a no-brainer, right? It's like, where did you start? Oh, and you're here already. So you have to measure backwards in order to see how far you have come. This was interesting. And I think I let's share some stories on this because I feel like this is going to be, if it was for you, like it was for me, this is going to be, it's very eye-opening. 10 years isn't very long, and yet 10 years is a long time for something to happen, change within yourself. Are you the same person that you were 10 years ago? I am not even near. Are your interests and priorities the same? Not all, some maybe. So psychologist Daniel Gilbert found that when people give themselves time to reflect on their former selves, they realize they're not the exact same person they were 10 years ago. Roughly 15 years ago, when I was 18 years old, I was living at my cousin's house, sleeping on his couch, playing Warcraft 15 hours a day. And then he goes through and then he shares on who he is now. And it doesn't even sound like the same person, right?
There's that, I can't remember where we read it. I'm sure you guys all remember it too. And I know it came from a book or somewhere, but I can't remember. The quote just still sticks with me. My tailor is the only one who looks at me with reason because he remeasures me every time he sees me. He doesn't expect me to be the same because he knows I will have changed. And that's just putting it in my own words, but that's how I think of it. It's like people from my past think that they know me. They don't know me. They don't know me. If you haven't seen me in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, you have no idea who I am.
Mm-hmm. Pull out your journal, give yourself some real time on this. And this really, really convicted me. I was like, I have to get out my journal and do more of these thought processes, pen to paper, simply because it'll be really interesting to look back 10 years from now and see where we were today, right? And it's really, you get to take out your journal, yeah? So let's go roughly about 10 years. Where were you 10 years ago? What were you focused on? How did you measure success back then? Good question. How has your situation changed? What do you know now that you didn't know back then? What have been some of the biggest lessons you have learned over the last 10 years? Whoa, these are big questions. And it's only in the span of 10 years, right? What have been some of your biggest accomplishments and achievements since then? And don't overcomplicate this. It doesn't have to be hard putting these things down on paper, right? So I've noticed that people who measure their accomplishments in terms of specifics tend to be happier and a lot more energized than people who speak and think in generalities. And I really, really liked this part because in one of our chats at the beginning of this, like just a week ago in our new year, we talked about goals and setting visual goals, screensavers, goals to paper. And we talked about add at least one thing that really scares you. Something that matters so much to you that you know that you cannot avoid it. But really, within yourself, you're like, ugh, every time you think of it. And the reason you do that is that's something that's going to pull you out and make you do the work to get there because it means so much. If you don't have that, you're talking in generalities and it's vague and your body doesn't care if it's real or not. It's just, I'll just say this, and it's appeasing yourself, but it's not real. So nothing within you is going to push you to truly achieve that scary thing. And so someone who responds to a question like, how are things going? With an answer like, things are pretty good, isn't actually connecting with their real experience. But if you think about specific facts when you assess your situation, this grounds your feeling in reality. For example, saying, this recently completed project earned 10 times as much money as it did last year is very different from saying this project did pretty well. If you work in the world of generalities, it's easy to get confused about what's really going on, and your sense of your achievements will be vague and unclear. And the more vague and unclear we are about ourselves, the harder it will be to put things into your list of goals and to be really scared about them because you haven't made them mean something important to you. So if you were on last night's call with Amber and Jordan, and they talked about some of the really scary things they did, and Amber did a post on that later on where she had the picture of herself and her very own little event in some kind of Applebee's restaurant to where she is today. It's a drastic difference. And it's because it scared her so much that she forced herself to do it. So the reason I put some focus on that is because I think every time that I myself have made a goal that was kind of vague and there wasn't clarity or a date set to it, tomorrow just happens, but nothing changes. And that's the discouraging part. It draws you into the gap and it doesn't propel you into the gain. Every time I have set a goal and it has actually scared the socks off of me, and I knew it was going to take very hard work and very intentional pushing myself to get there, even if we didn't make the goal, the growth was always visible, tangible, and there. So let's talk about it a little bit. 10 years ago, where were you? Unmute and share something from 10 years ago of where you were at that time in your life.
Wrong button. Okay, I'll go first. So 10 years ago, I just moved into the house. I was working at Tony Roma's. I was like, it's pretty well, no, I wasn't exclusively nice by that point because my kids were older. So it's like they could sit at home. It's like my shifts were daytime, nighttime, just sporadic all over the place. It's like about the house, we had just moved in. We didn't have all the furniture that we wanted. I'm still looking for pieces for certain areas of my house, which some took like 9 years to find, but they're there now. Right? It's just like my kids were young. Like I was still very, I don't know, definitely not where I am now. Definitely not even a smidgen. Like my mindset was completely different then. It was just like work, and I enjoyed my work and it was all good. And, but I wasn't anywhere near where I am now, right? Like now it's like my house is fully furnished and I think I finally have all the pieces, and my mindset is completely different than it was 10 years ago, because I think I started that kind of journey about 5 or 6 years ago. So it's like, yeah, like I'm not even remotely close to the same person that I was 10 years ago, not even in the slightest.
Something in your life propelled you to move towards more.
Who wants to go next? Because very often saying something out loud is It makes a big deal. You can say it in your head, but saying it out loud is huge. Rebecca, 10 years ago, I was only 17, so very young, innocent, and making some not great choices. Worked as waitress and got promoted to head waitress at that age. So I definitely know I was productive and knew how to manage running a restaurant. That's something you can be proud of.
It's a big deal at 17.
That is. And I think I know of people who constantly wish they could return to their past. And that seems sad to me because if you wish you constantly could return to your past, have you grown the last 10 years or are you still staying in the same spot? Because I've been growing the last 10 years and I don't want to return to 22-year-old Sheila. 22-year-old Sheila was very naive. She was very negative. She was very self-focused. She was a new mom who had no idea where up was or where down was, and she knew nothing about all of the things that I know now. Like, I now have this wealth of knowledge that I wouldn't have if it hadn't been for the experiences and the journey that I've been on the last 10 years. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. I wouldn't trade that for anything.
And hard times make you stronger and better, as much as what we want to avoid them, as much as the human mind wants to not have to go through that, right? 10 years ago, I was at the beginning of building my business. I think I was a gold. I was wondering about that yesterday. I think I was a gold, and I think the concept of ever being a diamond and seeing people, I'm just going to talk business wise, seeing people achieve that in this company was absolutely impossible to me. And 10 years ago, I was very discouraged at where I was at 40 years old in my life. And I felt like I had failed on so many places of where I'm already 40 and I haven't done anything. It felt like I had worked all my life, but never gotten anywhere. And while that wasn't true, on a lot of aspects of my life, it also caused me to really push ahead into wanting more and not letting regular things hold me back. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done is just basically stepping out, especially with a whole community of opinions upon me of what I was doing, and leaning into the growth of this is for me, this is for us, this is for my family and my future. And so my reality today of where I'm sitting today would never have happened had I not made that choice at 40 years old. I'm going to build this business. I'm going to see what it takes. And I'm not going to give up. And if I think about the people making that choice now, I would be the biggest cheerleader. I would be like yelling and screaming, do not quit. You can do this. Everybody can do this. Do not stop. It is not impossible. And it's only because I'm looking back and seeing and measuring the gains. There have been so many gains. Has there been hard times? Absolutely. But massive amount of gains that brought us to where we are today, right? And so I think looking back and using this journaling process of really getting into details, like he makes bullet points of where he looks back to where they were over the past 10 years, right? And then he goes to the last 3 years. So if we think about where were we 3 years ago? And he's got some really specific points of what they did in their life, right? And so if we look at specific points in our life, are we just seeing them as they have already happened and not really putting emphasis on, oh, that happened 3 years ago. Where am I today? What did I do to get from 3 years ago today to 3 years ahead today, right? Now let's zoom in even more. Make a bulleted list of all your gains over the past 12 months. I'm going to read Melinda's comment because it's good. I feel like I've grown in my mindset in many ways from 10 years ago. I grew quickly in business and then hard things came up in business, and it feels like I've reverted to being apprehensive and moving forward in business. I know letting that go is so important and choosing to not let that hold me back. So I feel like I've relapsed in my mindset and have to keep pulling myself out of that. Doing this book study is really showing me where I've relapsed to thinking in the gap and need to change. And you know what? I think that's us in so many areas of our lives, right? But being able to point that out and get clarity on, oh, this is what I'm doing, is what is going to make you take that next step. So if you think about what's one thing that really scares you for the year ahead, put that on your list. Okay, let's think about the last 12 months. Page 109, that bottom paragraph, I feel like is really, really important. To be clear, it is gap thinking to be embarrassed of your former self. There is no reason to have any negative emotions or energy towards your past. Isn't that freeing? It's all just, Maisie's playing with the kitties. It is all just growth when you look towards your past. Why should it be embarrassing? Everybody has a past. Everybody has done things that they don't feel proud of. Everybody has experienced things that were hard or good or amazing, right? So the gain enables you to see every experience you have had as positive. So if you look at every experience that you have ever had as positive, you will be able to see even those negative experiences in your past had a positive impact for you moving ahead. Something that you had to learn from that negative experience gained you a positive lesson. So you get to think in the gain with that, right? The truth is, you're not the same person you were in the past. Your former self didn't know what you know now. Know better, do better, right? They weren't as clear as you are now. So love your former self, have empathy, compassion, and respect for yourself. They were different in a context of you are now. They had different perspective. They had different peer groups than what you have now. Friends can really change your perspective of who you hang out with. They didn't have the knowledge, tools, or skills that you have now. So if you think about even just a year ago, what is something that you learned in the past year? Where were you 12 months ago? What were you focused on back then? How has your life changed and improved? If you have something that pops up for you, just unmute and answer. What do you know now that you didn't know back then? How has your measure of success improved over the past 12 months? And what are you measuring now that you were not measuring back then? Sometimes avoidance causes us not to measure, because that's being vague and talking in generalities and not being specific, right? When we are specific, yes, then we are not procrastinating. So past 12 months, what were your gains? I have a big one because for us, last year was a big year with moving and just stepping out into, it's easy to stay in your comfort zone. We could have easily stayed in our comfort zone. Mortgage was paid off. We lived life in a comfortable place, but we also knew that we weren't growing and we weren't challenging ourselves and we were not taking our dreams head on. We were living the day to day where it was easy to say, oh, whatever happens tomorrow doesn't matter. Today matters. Today matters a lot of what I'm going to be building today and moving ahead into tomorrow. Because I took a dream head on and made it happen, not just I, but life in general. And it's scary. And it's a good scary. It's a good scary that'll push you to keep growing.
12 months ago, I had a full-time job as a daytime bartender at Montana's, probably the most ideal schedule that any server could ever even imagine. I would probably be done by 4:30. Sometimes I'd start at 10:30, sometimes I'd start at 8. I had just come back from a trip to Toronto that came in third place in a whole drink competition that I had entered. And, it was the new year and life was pretty chill. My daughter was looking for a new car and life was great. And it's even like from 12 months to now, it's completely freaking different. Right. It's like in February, it's like I ended up getting a new car. And I was like, okay, it's like I got a great job. I ideal hours, all the things. I'm good at my job. I make good money. But then 4 months after that, I decided to quit. Right. So it's just like I am not anywhere even close to where I was 12 months ago to today.
And that's a really good example of forcing change. Like you could have stayed there being comfortable, right? And people seek comfort because it alludes to the promise of certainty. But there is no certainty in life. And people seek certainty because it gives the illusion of safety. It gives the illusion of that you're safe, nothing bad can happen. But oh my goodness, you quit your job and now you don't have that paycheck. And what if Plexus all of a sudden just falls into a fiery pit tomorrow and is gone, right? Like we think these thoughts, but there's nothing more productive than just forcing yourself into that next step of growth and saying, I'm going to give it my all, regardless of what happens. We'll figure it out.
And that's like, even if it doesn't turn out the way you had hoped, it doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad. So 12 months ago, I started something new because I wanted to find answers for some of the things I was dealing with. And so I went on carnivore, thinking that it was going to be a good answer for me. And I did it for 4.5 months, and I'm very proud that I stayed consistent for 4.5 months, even while going to Dominican. But it was not the right answer for me, and I am not made for it. And I'm not looking at that as a bad thing. I actually think that that is a great thing because I wouldn't know that if I hadn't done it. I wouldn't have gained all of the wisdom and the knowledge if I hadn't tried it. I wouldn't have known that I would have had the grit to do something like that for 4.5 months if I hadn't done it. There's so many positives that came out of it for me, even if it didn't turn out the way I had wanted it to. And from there, that experience catapulted me into my next stage of learning and growing, and that has been just amazing. And so I think it comes down to always just taking the next right step.
And a year goes by so fast.
I agree with Sheila. Taking the next right step, even though it's scary, even though you think it's just a small one, doesn't matter. Even though it doesn't turn out, just to still do it.
Because there is no failure in doing, there is only failure in not doing, in quitting. And then you break it down to 90 days. And this is something that I'm purposing to work on this year is every 90 days, I want to do a basic overview and do some bullet points of where am I? What am I doing to move ahead in the next 90 days? And how can I change some things that I feel are not moving me ahead, but keeping me where I am? Because I feel like the more that you hone in and look at the details, the more you will be able to see, oh, I could be doing this here and doing more of that or less of that, right? And really getting clear on what have I done these 90 days? Break your year up into quarters and look at, and for me, it's business growth. This year, I want to be focused on business growth. It has to be very clear of where I want to go and how I'm going to get there. And the more clear I make the details in my GPS map, the more I will be able to see of what I'm not doing and what I am doing. So what have been your gains over the past 90 days? Well, very often at the end of the year, we do the whole last 90 days, right? And even just doing that chunk of the last 90 days of the year where you realize the year is coming to an end, how much faster it seems like it's going when you're counting down. It just feels like it's, oh my goodness, now it's already 60, now it's already 30, right? Bang, the year is over. Time will pass regardless. But if you do put in some visibilities of where you are at, it'll give you so much more to reflect. What did I believe 3 months ago that I no longer believe today? There's some questions in the things in the exercise that he takes us through that might seem small, but they're very good reflections because you're going to be changing subconsciously throughout the time as it passes, right? During the conversation, they discuss Kahneman's blockbuster book, Thinking Fast and Slow, on his Nobel Prize winning research. Do you still agree with everything you wrote in that book? Grant asked. No, I don't. And I'm so glad because I love learning. And that was a Nobel Prize winning book. And he doesn't believe everything that he wrote in that book anymore because he's been changing. He's been learning, growing, right? Kahneman is in the gain. Grant is in the gain. Every 90 days, you can change your life. You can upgrade how you think, how you see, and how you live. You can get updates for your iPhone so it can continuously function better. You can also get regular updates to your mindset. Scratching post in my house. Get off. So pull your journal back out and start listing gains you have made over the previous 90 days. List your tangible accomplishments, but also write about how you have evolved your thinking, your priorities, and your goals. What is the most important progress you have made in the past 90 days? It might be changing a mindset. It might be teaching yourself to think in the gain and reminding yourself daily when you find yourself in the gap, or hourly. Sometimes it's hourly, right? What lessons have you learned? What are you proud of from the past 90 days? And so then he lists his last 90 days, showing us how you can break it down into pieces, right? After you've gone through all of these exercises, you may be thinking that sharing your gains is uncomfortable. Many people, including high achievers, do not like sharing their progress with others. This is a byproduct of the comparing and competing in the gap culture that we live in. So when I find myself feeling negative thoughts or catching myself thinking something negative about the next person's accomplishments, then I'm like, oh, that's me being in the gap. What about their accomplishments makes me feel like I need to compete with that, right? More so you learn to be self-aware instead of looking at the other person and judging them. And so what you can use that same thing when you find other people judging you for your accomplishments. That's them being in the gap. That's their way of thinking, not yours. Stop comparing. Very much so. However, being in the gain is not about boasting or comparison. The goal of the gain is to specifically and genuinely measure your own tangible progress and to help others better measure their own progress as well. Having supportive and motivating people around you to share your gains is so powerful. And we see this in cheering chats. We see this when someone is going for a rank, how we rally around them. We speak life over what's happening. We don't go into the chat and say, how do you even think that you're going to do that? Like, how do you think people would ever accomplish anything, right? So now that you have practiced measuring your gains in this chapter, continue measuring your gains on a monthly and even on a weekly basis. And I'm going to say on a daily and on an hourly, because it's so important to find yourself when you're sitting in a place of where it's just been you for a while. Oh, I'm so sick of this. I'm going to get up and do something else. And you kind of push it aside because you have allowed the gap to enter into your mentality. Stand up and remind yourself, hey, what's my gain here? What did I just do? What's my gain? There's got to be a gain in everything that you do. and it just pulls you out of that negativity immediately, right? And it's a habit that we get to create. In the next chapter, you'll learn how to measure your daily gains, and which will help you stay in the game and maintain massive momentum. So some chapter takeaways. We're just after 10 already. I would love to hear like 1 or 2 takeaways from the chapter for you guys.
I love what Holly said. I often don't share my wins or gains out of fear of making others feel like they're less. And I know I've been there and I've done that, and sometimes I still do that. But we each get to take accountability for ourselves. And if that makes them feel less, that says more about them than it says about you. Because as long as you're in your lane and you're doing your thing and you're focusing on your goals and you're not comparing, I've compared myself to people so often and their success has made me feel less, but that just has been an example of what I'm not doing and where I'm not growing and where I could be and should be growing and what I should be doing.
So take this example. This is how it was taught to me, and it's something I've always remembered. You started at the same place of where the person beside you could start. Let's say you're on even playing field, you both start, and then you raise the bar for yourself and you say, oh, I'm going to achieve this. So Melinda and Holly both raised the bar. These people stayed here. They didn't want to raise the bar on themselves. This is self-accountability, right? So these people stayed here, and then Melinda and Holly raised the bar, and they were like, oh, cool, I can do that. How about I raise the bar a little bit more? Okay. Oh, wow, look at me. Whew, this happened. How did this even happen? Wow. Okay, so let's raise the bar a little bit further because I can do it. Obviously, it's working. Let's raise the bar. And all of a sudden, these people down here say, oh, you're bragging. Are you? No, they get to raise the bar just like you did. Everybody gets the same chance. Everybody gets the same opportunity. They just get to choose of what they want to make of it. And if we fear making someone else feel bad because of what we have accomplished, we can turn that around and say, look, friend, come with me. I can help you. You can do this too. Instead of them staying in their gap mindset, let's bring them over to the gain mindset, right? Good thoughts, guys. Thank you so much for sharing them. Anyone else want to share something before we close? Next week, we are measuring wins daily. I would advise to start doing this now, this week. And so by next week, when we start this chapter, you can actually come and say, oh, last week, Thursday, this is a gain that I measured. This is what I did. All right, guys, thanks so much for being here. Have a great day.